Hello everyone, I am Zarah Gagatiga. I'm a teacher librarian from the Philippines. I work in the Beacon Academy, an IB World School, offering the Middle Years program and the Diploma program. Apart from being a teacher librarian, I am also an author, a storyteller, and a blogger. I was born and raised in Manila, the capital of the Philippines, but right now I am living in the province of Laguna with my family. Laguna is a province that's located in the southern Tagalog region, and it is located in Luzon, one of the three big islands in the archipelago. So for today, I am going to share with you stories and storytelling for hope and healing. In times of crisis, challenges, and conflict, we turn to stories, and there we find consolation, empathy, and the safe space to be ourselves. Let's begin with a story. And with my storytelling, I am going to use a piece of paper. I am going to make something from this piece of paper. Here we go. Ta-da! There. And this is a story about Joseph and his overcoat. So Joseph had an overcoat. It was a beautiful coat. It was his favorite overcoat, and he wore it all the time. He wore it all the time that it got old and worn, tattered and torn. But he thought that he can still make something out of it. And he made a jacket out of it. It was his favorite jacket. It fit him just right. He wore it all the time until it got old and worn, tattered and torn. Joseph thought, I can still make something out of it. And he did. He made a vest out of it. It was his favorite vest. It fit him well. So he wore it all the time until it got old and worn, tattered and torn. Joseph thought again, and he said to himself, I can still make something out of it. And he did. He made a scarf out of it. It was a beautiful scarf. It was his favorite scarf. He wore it all the time until it got old and worn, tattered and torn. So he made a tie out of it. Oh, it was a handsome tie. He wore it all the time until it got old and worn, tattered and torn. He made a handkerchief out of it, which he used to wipe his sweat and blew his nose in. Of course, he washed it and leave it out to dry until it got old and worn, tattered and torn. But he made something out of it. He made a button out of it, which he placed in his suspender. And then one day, the button got lost. Joseph had nothing, only pieces of the story of the coat, the jacket, the vest, the scarf, the tie, the handkerchief, and the button. Putting this all together, Joseph was able to create something out of nothing. And so we begin by creating beautiful things with something or maybe with nothing. Stories are like that sometimes when we feel that nothing else is happening or when the creativity is just running on empty. It's an opportunity for us to look at what we can make out of that situation. So that story is taken from the book, Handmade Tales, Stories to Make and Take by Diane de las Casas, illustrated by Philip Chow, published by Libraries Unlimited in the year 2008. Okay, So as a teacher librarian for 25 years and counting, I make use of stories and storytelling to reach out to children and to connect with them. Stories and the many ways of telling them are beneficial to developing literacy skills and language, especially in the Philippines when we are required to learn not just one language, not just Filipino or Tagalog or the mother tongue languages that we speak in the regions. We're also expected to learn English, and exposure to stories and the manner of storytelling these stories help in learning language that is old, new, familiar, and sometimes strange. Over the years, research tells us that stories and storytelling contribute to building empathy and confidence among children. And that's what I think is a beautiful thing about stories and storytelling, books, literature in general. Yes, we can learn skills, thinking skills, language skills from literature that we hear, read, encounter. More than anything else, I think it's also an avenue where we can acquire and develop aesthetics and emotional quotient. In the practice of school librarianship, this encounter with stories and storytelling is a bibliotherapy service and program for young people. By designing a bibliotherapy service, as well as a program for children and young people, books, stories, and the different forms and genre of literature become sources of information that promote well-being, grow compassion, and value aesthetics. There are two kinds of bibliotherapy if we are to use stories and if we tell them in this avenue. One is developmental bibliotherapy and the other one is clinical bibliotherapy. My presentation for today will focus on the former, since school librarianship involves working with children's developmental needs. I love it that I'm exposed to books, to literature, different media and technology, and that I am able to bridge all these wonderful materials to children of different ages. Books, stories, and literature for children are grouped following categories of reading skills and levels, and we use this information to classify and organize learning resources for children and young people. So teacher librarians, and librarians are in a good place to make use of literature for developmental bibliotherapy. Bibliotherapy is both an experience and a process, and it involves several steps. The first is the engagement with the story. The second is identification. The third is catharsis and insight. And the last is taking action. There are also opportunities for follow through or follow up. And later in my bibliotherapy sampler, I am going to share with you the activities and instructions that follow these stages in the bibliotherapy experience. We can guide children in the process and in this experience. Studies on bibliotherapy show that when children, or even adults like us, engage in a story, the reader or the listener go through a process of all of these things. They identify to the character, the scene, the plot, the sequence of events, even the illustrations of books. Catharsis or mirroring happens, and insight can be derived from this encounter. Literature becomes a platform for imagination, adaptation, and growth. So here now is a bibliotherapy sampler that I am going to explain and present. Just recently, I used this bibliotherapy experience with our high school students, working with our guidance counselors and co-teachers in the Beacon Academy. The context being that of distressing festival. So there are many activities put together in our distressing festival, which we do on a regular basis. And one of them is a bibliotherapy session with a teacher librarian. So the engagement in literature or in stories is introduced. And for that experience or for that session, I made use of the picture book, Rain Before Rainbows. So this is something that our high school students are accustomed to. They may be dealing with text that's required by the MYP and the DP, but it's amazing how our students in the Beacon Academy warm up to children's books, particularly to picture books that have beautiful illustrations. This is only proof that children's literature cuts across age levels. We may believe in the developmental processes that learning language and reading skills are built in, but there's also the belief in our learning community that picture books are for all ages. So, reading aloud Rain Before Rainbows by Smriti Prasadam Halls, illustrated by David Litchfield, students get to experience language and the auditory or the oral effect of language beautifully written in a picture book. After reading the story, there are activities that the students did. First is they were asked to identify 3 important details and to summarize them. Then they recorded 2 things that are of interest to them, according to the poetry or the story that was read aloud. They were asked to write 1 question about the poem or the story. And the questions they wrote varied from the simplest to the nonsensical to the philosophical. And then we had group sharing. We shared our notes, our questions with a partner, with a member, and there was interaction in the breakout rooms. So all of these engagement and activities happened in a Zoom meeting room, wherein we used the breakout rooms to divide a group of 15 students plus 5 teachers. So it was a pretty interesting mix because we have teachers and students coming together in small groups and talking about the literature that they engaged in. And it's amazing that over the years we have built in the culture of listening, reflection, and we respond accordingly to each other. And then, of course, there's the challenge of listening some more because it will lead us to more reflection until we take action on our response to the literature. So for taking action, which was just presented to the students right after the group sharing for lack of time, these activities were uploaded in the school's LMS so that students can asynchronously do the activities on their own. So they can create collages by choosing pictures from their photo album. They can create a collage that they can do at home, or they can pick a digital collage making app. They can choose photos from their photo album on their phones, put it together in a photo collage app that they have chosen from Google Play Store, or perhaps from iPhone. Okay, and once they have made the collage, they can write something about it. After writing what they remember of the picture or the collage, they can now put together a journal and use the pictures, use the collages, use the journal entries as springboard for further writing. Maybe an essay, an article that they can write in their free time, or maybe use these journal entries to spark essays required in school. Also poetry. So the taking action activities, these are activities that students can do on their own, but somehow connected to not just schoolwork, but also their personal life. And it's amazing how our students warmed up to the exercise. Some of them submitted their collage in the school LMS. And where does it go? If they submitted a collage with their journal entry, it's published in the school website or the school's newsletter or the school's publication. So to emphasize the relevance and or to show an example or a model of a collage with a journal entry, I presented my own work. And it would elicit a lot of questions from the students. They would ask me background of those photos. That's why I explained where I got them, where I took them, and it becomes a conversation altogether. Um, we all missed going out in this time of the pandemic. So it was a bittersweet moment discussing about things we thought of doing right after uh, the lockdown. Okay, as a follow-through activity and as a teacher librarian, I recommended materials and resources for them to make use of in their free time so they can continue doing bibliotherapy sessions on their own. And they can continue creating collages if they're interested. They can continue writing poetry and making journal entries. So over here, okay, this is my Bitmoji reading room for the session, which I call the Room of Rhyme and Reason. In this blackboard, we have a heart map where they can map their emotions through the figure or the image of a heart. More activities on collage making and mosaic making, a collection of uh, stories, articles about feelings and emotions and becoming aware of them so that self-knowledge and self-awareness can be built as we go through this difficult time in our lives. Over the past years, we have had book spine poetry activities. I would ask our high school students to create book spine poetry during recess or lunch break or dismissal time. And for a month or two, they would compose their free verse poetry and we would have a book spine poetry reading. It's like a festival on its own. And then I put in a review of Rain Before Rainbows and recommended resources about hope, resilience, and healing. So here we have titles of books and other resources that our students can check out in their free time. We also encourage writing poetry, and Magnetic Poetry Online is a recommended resource where they can create poetry from given words, put it all together, send it to friends they are thinking of or they would like to share the poetry with. And then I recommended apps that they can use to create collages. And then over here, Lumikha ng Tula, create a poem, is a link to different Filipino authors and poets who are writing poetry at this time of COVID-19. And because we're learning not just Filipino or Tagalog, English, there are also entries and recommended lists in this link in the mother tongue. So in a way, we are introducing different languages, world languages to our students. And over here is a featured poetry by one of our celebrated poets and priest, Father Bert, who's a Jesuit, and he wrote about the rain and that moment when he took a walk in the garden. So our students now have an array of resources to read about Filipino authors, poets, their works, and other languages in the mother tongue, as well as English, Spanish, and Mandarin, since these subjects are offered in the DP. And here we have a television and I put together a link on YouTube for Poetry Jam videos. And one of their favorites is Lin-Manuel Miranda, of course, and they are able to watch all of his live poetry readings. So this reading room, this Bitmoji reading room, is available in the school library website as well as the school's LMS. So to emphasize the importance of bibliotherapy, storytelling is a way to bring in courage, inspire hope, and eventually heal ourselves in this difficult time. Bibliotherapy helps promote attitudes of respect and acceptance in inclusive environments. This book, Sirena Bayan, a Filipino book written by Candy Gourlay and illustrated by Francesca Chesa, is actually a bilingual book. Candy Gourlay is a Filipino author, but she's based in London, and she has ties in the Philippines. And this picture book that she wrote, if I translate it in English, the title would be, Is That a Mermaid? Is That a Mermaid is a wonderful book on discovery. There's a manatee. Okay? So you see this manatee in the cover. We call it dugong in the Philippines. And while the manatee was swimming very near the sea, the manatee met two kids, and the two kids immediately recognized the manatee as a manatee. But then the manatee asserted that, no, I'm not a manatee. I am a mermaid. And so that begins their wonderful adventure. And I love this book because it opens a lot of discussions on identity, on acceptance, on perspective taking. And in a way, it's a children's book, but there's also a hint of understanding one's bias. Children's books affects a child's theory of mind, an understanding of the mental state of others. So discussion of books read aloud to a child positively impacts a child's ability to emphasize. So this book is The Chase, or in Filipino, Habulan. Habulan is running after all these folkloric creatures we have in our Philippine literature. And this child, apparently, the child in the poetry, it's actually a poem by Cora Dandan, illustrated by Beth Parocha, fears all of these creatures that he could not understand or grasp, knowing. But eventually, the chase led him to a better perspective of all these creatures that can be vulnerable and fearful at the same time. So where do we begin if we wish to conduct storytelling bibliotherapy sessions in our schools and learning communities? I think in the US or in the UK, in Europe. This is what I think and my impression of your libraries. You have a body of children's books and children's literature that you can pick out and put together in a recommended list for particular needs and for specific events that's relevant to the life of children. These recommended lists are good. They're valuable. And that's what Carrie McCaffrey would recommend as well. Develop a comprehensive bibliotherapy list, inclusive of all literary types, genre, and media format. Accompany the book list or directory with displays of books. And I love doing this. I miss putting up displays, physical displays in the library. So the Bitmoji reading room that I put together for a bibliotherapy session actually has a book display, virtual or online version. And yes, our students are interested to check out these titles. And through a book delivery service, our students can make a request for the books to be picked up on campus or to be delivered in their homes. Create information on mental health and wellness books. If you have an array of titles to discuss wellness, social emotional learning, it would be appropriate at this moment to pick out information from these books and put them together, maybe in a brochure, in an infographic, in a video, in a vlog, and present this to the student body or to the learning community. because it will really go a long way. Create programming with children and teens that address difficult issues and fosters learning in a safe environment. So other than bibliotherapy sessions, storytelling sessions in the library, an activity I did several years ago before COVID-19 was a makerspace. And this makerspace is not the kind where all of these cool gadgets are put together in one corner. This makerspace is for art and for healing. So I put there clay and paper cutouts and origami and crafts that students can do with their hands. And this was spread out outside the library so students can easily access them. And we put it at the time when there are exams. And in between breaks, they would go to the makerspace to create something from clay and crafts and origami. And it may sound like an activity for grade school and middle school students, but even our high school students find the makerspace for art and healing as a good space to be and to distress themselves from the academic work and the exams. Now, storytelling and bibliotherapy can also be beneficial to the community. When Taal volcano erupted in January 12, 2020, we were called upon to help communities in Taal. Taal is in the province of Batangas and Cavite, so two provinces near that volcano were greatly affected. We were greatly affected in Laguna as well. Taal volcano is 30 kilometers away from where I live. Our school, the Beacon Academy, is 27 kilometers from the volcano. So it was a catastrophic event. There were many communities who were displaced. Children had to stop school. Their families were put in evacuation centers and relief centers, and their life turned upside down. And many of the communities living in Taal are fisher folks and farmers, and they were driven away from their livelihood. So much as the government and private sector help the communities in, affected by the eruption, librarians who are also living in the region put together relief operations. But other than that, we also set up a bibliotherapy program for children in the evacuation centers. And it was an opportunity for me to create a module on bibliotherapy, particularly for children and families who were displaced by the volcanic eruption of the Al volcano. And so it was an opportunity for me to also rally other librarians living in the region. And because there is an association of librarians in the southern Tagalog region, where the provinces of Laguna, Cavite, and Batangas are located, we banded together by conducting sessions on bibliotherapy. And the wonderful thing about it is that I volunteered to run a workshop on bibliotherapy, and I was surprised to find interested librarians to work with. So I put the module part by part in my blog, and you can find it there. The first part is an explanation of how I started with bibliotherapy. Part two is a presentation of bibliotherapy materials, research, and studies over the years. Why libraries, school libraries in particular, are perfect avenues or places to have bibliotherapy programs. Of course, we begin with reading guidance and reading advisory, but we can be very creative in its implementation by instituting bibliotherapy sessions as well. And then, of course, it's not complete without sharing frameworks of a session. The same instructions and strategies and stages or processes of bibliotherapy I shared early on. But this time it's more teaching related, that we have a pre-reading, during reading, and post-reading activities, because we had teachers volunteering to do the bibliotherapy session as well. So I kept in mind the needs of the teachers. Also, parents volunteered to do bibliotherapy sessions. And then, of course, there's also a sampler and toolkit. The sampler contains recommended resources, tips for bibliotherapists, tips for school librarians and teachers who are first-time bibliotherapists, or teachers and librarians who are telling stories in this context of children being displaced. So I also consulted guidance counselors for this module and talked to different mental health practitioners so that we can create a module that meets the needs of the students or the children that we will interact or engage in. And here we are, one of the groups that I conducted a training workshop on bibliotherapy. We're not all librarians. Many of us are librarians, but in the picture you will see, you have there a storyteller, a social worker, we have teachers, we have parents, we have a writer. Beside me is my professor back in college, which he attended, that he attended my workshop, really gave me so much support. And this group of wonderful people interested in storytelling and bibliotherapy were still connected together in a Facebook group, and we share resources, we share stories of our storytelling sessions and bibliotherapy experiences over on social media. The guide and the module can be accessed in my blog, and this link over here is also the link to the G Drive of the entire module. So that's about it. That's my experience in stories and storytelling as a teacher librarian based in a school in Laguna, and also helping out with my community in times when hope and healing is called for or is essential. So I hope that you get to see the experience that we have here in the Philippines on how we use stories and storytelling for hope and healing, particularly in this time of the pandemic. So if I started with a story, let me end with a story. I'm going to share with you the story of the chicken and the crocodile. And this is a story that I first heard from Roger Jenkins during the Manila International Storytelling back in the year 2008. Okay, so here we go. It was a hot day and Chicken was very thirsty. She came upon a river. It looked placid and peaceful. Ooh, it was so tempting to dive in the river. But, you know, Chicken is thirsty, so he took a sip. She took a sip. Refreshing. She took another sip. It was so good. She drank some more. Wow. And so Chicken was relieved. She didn't feel that hot anymore. And while she was drinking, she was unaware of a crocodile nearby. Unknown to her, this crocodile has not eaten for days. Aha, the crocodile said. The chicken looks juicy. I'm going to eat that chicken all to myself, Crocodile said. So Crocodile swam near her, and when he was near enough, he opened his big jaws to snap a chicken into his mouth. But Chicken was quick enough to shout, "Wait! Don't eat me! Please, brother Crocodile, I am your sister." And Crocodile was confused. How could this be? How could the chicken call him a brother? It took some minutes for Crocodile to come to his senses to realize what has happened. Chicken has run away, and she was nowhere in sight. And Crocodile was mad. He stomped on the ground and shouted in anger, "I am not your brother, Chicken!" A lizard who was nearby saw everything, and he crept towards Crocodile and said, "Oh, brother Crocodile, give Chicken a break. She is correct, you know." Crocodile was still confused. He's not pretty smart. Lizard patted Crocodile on the head and said, "You, me, and that chicken that ran away, we all came from one egg." And Crocodile thought and thought, and he realized, lizard, me, crocodile, and that chicken. Ah, we all came from one egg. Thank you very much for your time. I thank the Learning Revolution for this opportunity to share what I do in my community. And hopefully, this opens up a window of understanding to everyone attending this summit. Thank you very much once more, and mabuhay.